TNF Podcast. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Click on that bell for notifications if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow and give us a share on there. That would be fantastic. All right, upcoming shows we got for you. We got on the 2nd of February at 5 p.m., we've got Rebecca Lord, the hardcore cheerleader. That's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. CJ Klemansky from Death Threat is going to be on the 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're not doing a show on the Super Bowl because, you know, nobody would watch. Let's see here. We've got on the 9th of March at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Raghunath Das, Ray Capo from Shelter, Youth of Today, and Better Than 1,000. And we also just added Frank Novinek from Hatebreed, Terror, Ringworm, and Integrity to be announced. And as you can see at the bottom here, we have an official merchandising company, Hell's Heart Merch Co. hellsheartco.bigcartel.com. Use the code 20 for 20% off your entire order. They are Bella Canvas t-shirts, tri-blend, 50% polyester, 25% cotton, 25% rayon. They feel amazing. So go ahead and pick one of those up. That would be greatly appreciated. All right. So my next guest today, she is a longtime veteran of the hardcore scene. She runs the Sisterhood zine, which is online. You can find them. We'll post all the information here in the comments. They're actually going to be doing a physical zine too, which is pretty cool. And she is also a fellow Star Trek nerd, which is going to be great because I never get to talk about Star Trek with anybody. And it's like one of my favorite things in the world. My buddy and I used to hike up the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. We would talk about Deep Space Nine all the time. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Miss, excuse me. It's usually a Mr. Sorry, Miss Kelly Sisterhood. I'm a jackass. What's going on? How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I am outstanding. We got some comments in here already, and I'm sure they're going to be lighting me up. Mister, how dare you? Love you, Kelly. Totally Storm. And then Lori Dawn. Hey, what's up, Lori? Hello, Kelly. So my first question that I usually like to ask my guests that are involved in the music scene was, how did you get exposed to music? Was there like, parents playing music? Did you have like family members that played music? And then, how did that kind of seg into hardcore? Like, what was your first show that wasn't hardcore? And then what was your first show that was hardcore?
I grew up in a household of music. My dad was a blues musician, and I don't have a first show I went to because I grew up just going to see my dad play in his cover band. So I woke up every Saturday morning to my dad repeating over and over again, like, 3 of the same notes from a Stevie Ray Vaughan track because he played by ear. So, I just was engrossed in it from the moment I was born. Music was everywhere at all times. The first big show I went to, or concert, was Candlebox and Sponge at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center. The first punk show I went to was probably 99 Cents at Montgomery Day in Orange County, New York. But there was
How did you get involved with punk and hardcore? Like, did you go to school with somebody that introduced you to it, or how did that work? What was your first exposure to that?
I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York. People now know what the Hudson Valley is, I think, because Mind Force has kind of like reintroduced everybody to that area of New York. But at the time we were sandwiched in between New York City and Albany. And there was just a pretty vibrant underground music scene. We had Vassar College radio. So I think probably my first foray into the punk scene was listening to it on college radio. And then through the local, like there was, like I mentioned, Montgomery Day, it's kind of like a festival. And they had bands play all day long. That's where I went, and that's where I saw punk rock for the first time. And therefore kind of went from punk rock into hardcore. I think a lot of people kind of end up taking that path. I was introduced to hardcore because I started dating, and I really hate telling the story because it always gives my ex-boyfriend far too much credit. But because we both found hardcore at the exact same time. So he was really into like prog rock, like Yes and Dream Theater, and he was in this, like, I met him. He went to a different school. He was a drummer, and everybody needs a drummer. And this local hardcore band that was like 2 blocks down from his house needed a drummer one day, and he's like, "Oh, I can play drums." So we went down to the practice, and I was like, "This is awesome." And the singer started making me mixtapes, and it was essentially a primer, the who's who of like 80s into the early 90s hardcore. And
Nice.
then that was it. I mean, I was hooked.
And you just kept going to shows after that?
Well, the band was, I would say, locally very popular, big fish, small ponds kind of thing, and they played with a lot of, and I didn't know it at the time, like influential bands. So I was always just kind of tagging along with them everywhere they went. And so I went to almost every weekend, multiple shows with them. And the singer was a bit older, and he would pick us up. I don't know why Mom let me go to all these places. Like, I wouldn't let my kids go with a bunch of hardcore kids somewhere. But we're driving
Sure.
in Newburgh, and we'd end up in parts of New Jersey and Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts. Like, I went all over the place, and I had absolutely no idea how lucky I was at all to see the amount of bands and be exposed to as much as I was at like 15.
What do you think the allure of it was? What attracted you to hardcore and punk rock so much?
Oh, I mean, my house is completely dysfunctional. I mean, I think that most of us end up in a, like, come from a place that's, you know, not exactly the cleavers, I guess. My
Sure.
and there was something about it even to this day, the energy of the room. You don't get that. Like, I grew up going to see my dad play at blues shows, and they're fun. I like live music, but it's a completely different experience when the line between the stage and the crowd doesn't really exist, and there's an enormous amount of energy, and there's a shared experience in the room that you just don't really have at like an indie rock show or at a blues show or something like that. It's more crowd
Yeah.
participation, I guess. And
Yeah.
I grew up with an angry guy yelling at me, so I thought maybe that it was just really familiar. A bunch of like people feeling really frustrated yelling at you, and then you get to yell
You
back.
Yeah, it's like I've always kind of equated like a hardcore show to being like going to like a really charismatic Christian church, and that it's like call and response, and that there's a lot of like, just wild energy and like craziness going on, We're seeing. I also wanted to mention too, Stevie Ray Vaughan was a big one that was playing in my house. The Texas Flood album and the Double Trouble that he did with his
hmm
brother. Yeah, those were big ones in my house.
When
And would you?
when I was a kid, my dad was obsessed with SRV. He had an SRV Strat that someone actually stole out of our house one day. But
Oh,
yeah, someone broke into our house and stole like 4 or 5 of his guitars. But when he died, it was the first time I ever saw my dad cry. That was his, like, ultimate. He idolized him.
yeah, yeah. It was such a tragic way that he went out too, and that's kind of typical of a lot of people that are, in music, like Buddy Holly and Big Bopper passed away, plane crash. The Van
hmm
Zants, all of them. So would you say like you mentioned kind of growing up in a dysfunctional family? Would you say that that was kind of what compelled you to the path of straight edge?
Well, the singer from my boyfriend's band introduced me to straight edge, but even before then, um, I had some very distinct ideas about drugs and alcohol from the time I was a really little kid. Like, I never liked it. I wasn't interested in it. And I think if I never were introduced to straight edge, I probably never would have been a drinker anyway, or have used any kind of like narcotics or anything like that. It really wasn't anything I've ever been interested in. And so when I learned about straight edge, I was like, oh, that's me. I mean, there's really a convenient thing. I'm not someone who's ever struggled with it. It's not anything I've ever wrestled with. If the label were to disappear tomorrow, I would absolutely still live the exact same lifestyle.
And were there like a high concentration of straight edge kids where you were at, or was that kind of like, because at least with hardcore, it seems to be a little bit more prevalent now. And with social media, we're kind of able to like, tap into people that kind of, share the same musical tastes and the same like lifestyles and ideologies that we have. But was that something that was like difficult for you to find like other like-minded people that were like that?
It wasn't necessarily difficult for me to find guys who were straight edge, but to find other girls that were straight edge, that was near impossible. And that's how I ended up um, discovering and working with the sisterhood, and eventually taking that over.
And you've been doing that for quite some time now.
Yeah, since like 1996. Not to date myself too terribly, but
Hey, I'm right there with you, so don't feel bad.
yeah, I mean, I immediately recognized that it was an all boys club, and I thought that there had to be other people like me. So I went looking for it online, and I found, and as we talked about earlier, that listserv. Because the sisterhood, and I didn't start it, unfortunately. Another person did, and they've since asked me. I'm not saying their name because they specifically asked me not to say their name ever associated with it. Um,
Okay.
she began it, and about a year into it was all set, I think, and that's when I took it over. But it was a listserv, which was basically for everybody who's not ancient. Basically, kind of like a mailing list where everybody wrote back to each other and commented to each other through email. And I took over that, and I made it into a website and grew it into a
And
community and worked on it for obsessively for years.
and as a result, were you able to find, local people, like, just based on that?
Uh, no, not local, but you know how kids are when you start doing something, people kind of will be like, oh, I want to do that too. So I was like, oh, we're let's go see my boyfriend's show, and I would bring my friends with me, and through that they started getting exposed to it as well. And then in high school, a couple of my friends were straight edge from getting that exposure from being introduced to it. And again, we were in the Hudson Valley, not too far from me, which kind of like a straight edge capital for a while. You had like One King Down, which is just massive to all of us. And then
Yeah.
again, we're only, the city is only an hour from us. So I think you've spoken to Danielle Dombrowski. Have you
I
ever
have
talked to the
not, but I
photographer?
know who she is. Yeah, she was, I've seen her episode on, Sarah's, podcast, The Hardcore Therapist, and, I understand, yeah, she's a photographer, but, yeah, I've never spoken to her, but I'm aware of her. I know who she is.
Well, we went to high school together, and she was a couple of years older than me, and we would go to shows together. And we
Oh,
we
cool.
still go to shows together now. So I mean, like, Hudson Valley it's a special place, and it's a little weird, but um, I had some straight edge kid friends growing up, and then when I went to college, I had tons of them, and I've pretty much had straight edge friends ever since.
And you were never like an exclusionary person, like some people in like the straight edge scene, that it used to be, kind of militant, like at least certain pockets of it, to where, they wouldn't hang out with anybody that wasn't straight edge, never anything like that with your clique or anything.
No, I mean, I think I always strove for the opposite, to be kind of like a bigger tent, kind of landing place for a lot of people, because the sisterhood, I would say late 90s, early 2000s, became a place not just for women and girls, but anybody else that fell between the cracks, that didn't feel like they were accepted into the larger hardcore scene and straight edge scene. So it was a much more of a, what do you gain from pushing people out, which is nothing. And,
Right.
I never subscribed to any of that hardline nonsense. I never interpreted it in that way. It becomes an unlivable, and
Right.
I don't think to make your life unlivable. I thought it was just made. It was thought up from the beginning to be something that makes your life better. You
Yeah.
know.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of those hardline people end up selling out anyway,
I don't know anybody who's hardline that didn't sell out. And not only did they sell out, they like crashed hard. I mean, they
Hard.
went straight
Yeah.
to like being like heroin addicts. Like it was like one
Yeah.
day they're straight edge, the next day they're like having over their.
I guess if you got to do it big, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely a lot of those guys kind of like, they're super into their beliefs and then they kind of um they definitely, yeah, just hit a wall and just, crash and burn. And what, like most influential, let's say like hardcore bands, and then, to go a little bit deeper, like straight edge bands.
What bands that I like or
Yeah.
well, growing up, like I mentioned earlier, One King Down was one of the ones that I think just blew all of our minds. Like I can remember sitting on this like little twin bed in my boyfriend's bedroom with the singer of his band and at the time his wife, and we listened to Bloodlust Revenge for the first time on one of those little boom boxes, all the lights crap that they used to have. You remember everything used to be like
Yeah.
light shows. And like when that first like the bass drum would hit and it was like a cannon, and we were all like, whoa, and they just
Yeah.
completely like took over everything. But you use the standards, like everybody listens to like Minor Threat or Gorilla Biscuits and the whole 9 yards. Other bands, not necessarily. Like, I don't think they ever called them some straight edge, but like 108 was huge for me.
Yeah. I know they had a lot of
Songs of
straight edge
Separation
members
was
at one point.
well, I mean, they all basically live that way, but whether or
Yeah.
not they take the title, I couldn't say everybody does. But like Songs of Separation was just phenomenal.
It's an incredible album.
Right? Like I'll listen to it start to finish without stopping. I don't have to like
Yeah.
move around. Newer bands that are coming out that I've been listening to a lot, or like that Time Heist has got my attention, and Magnitude, Bertold City, and like non-straight edge would be Mind Force. I think they really combine all the sounds from like the era that I grew up in with a little bit of like some modern sounds, and they just put it together in a way that it just sounds amazing.
Magnitude's from this area actually, and I didn't even know that. Yeah, Magnitude, not Mind Force. Yeah, they're from the Charlotte area, and I was like, I didn't even know who they were, and I was like, oh yeah, you got to check out Magnitude. And they're like huge. I had like no idea. Yeah. And so what do you think? Back to One King Down. Like, what did you think whenever they did God Loves Man Kills, and they had different singer?
I mean, it wasn't Fusco. It wasn't the same. It was like listening to a
Yeah.
different band. So I can't.
Yeah.
I think it's necessarily better or worse. It's different. I always
Yeah.
preferred that original lineup.
Yeah.
But there's good songs in there. They didn't hit the same.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely, definitely. Um, and so, like with Sisterhood, like you guys kind of organize events at hardcore shows. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, so we started. A friend of mine is how do I put? He works in the industry, and for years he's been trying to get me to do more, like with festivals and whatnot. Uh, so a couple years ago we did our first Furnace Fest where we had a
Oh,
booth,
nice.
and we do something called the Root Beer Social, which is it's silly, it's tongue in cheek, but we get a bunch of people, strange people, sober people before the festival, so we all get to know each other, and we get custom bottles of root beer, and we all hang out, and then for the rest of the show, we all have new friends. Here we did it. I think we had like 65, 70 people. The next year we did it over 100 people, and it's been so successful doing the booth that we kind of coined a name for it, which is separate from the Sisterhood, called the Straight Edge Social Club. And now we go to festivals underneath the banner of the Straight Edge Social Club, which is me, Alex, Kenny, Storm, Edge, and sorry, Storm, I just bungled your name, and my husband Tim. and we all travel together and we stay together and we just do this booth and we bring markers to X up kids' hands, and everybody has a really it's a really positive experience to have a bunch of people get together who kind of share this thread, and you can sit, and a lot of times our booth becomes like a hangout spot or a home base, as Alex says, where people can just come and sit and get away from, like, a festival's long and it's noisy and it's tiring, and they can just come and hang out and have some snacks with us and talk about music or whatever they want to talk about.
That's dope. I love that. That's fantastic. Now, like, with like the current state of, like, straight edge hardcore, like, I don't even know, like, I mean, like, are younger kids kind of like taking to the lifestyle? Like, do you meet a lot of people that are like in their, like, teens or 20s that are into it? I mean, because there's a lot of like old heads, like, I don't even think and I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I don't know that there's a lot of like the newer generation that maybe they know it, but they're not as, maybe they don't kind of take to it.
If you had asked me that question 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, no, the kids aren't into it. But there seems to be like this next wave coming. And just at FYA, I mean, there were so many young kids with giant bold X's on their hands, knowing every word to every song. And these are like, late teens to early 20s. And I would say, yeah, they're definitely, there is a resurgence in that younger age bracket. I think, mid 30s into early 40s, there's still a huge population that have stuck with it. And there's a lot of people in that other age range, like mid 20s to mid 30s, who knew about it, made fun of it when they were kids, but now are learning that they're, for either through needing to become sober because issues, or because their life took them in a different direction, or rediscovering it. There's a lot of people who are claiming edge in their like 30s now. So
yeah, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, my husband has never claimed straight edge, and he, because he used to drink and smoke, and he has a, well, you can ask him sometime what all his reasoning.
Sure.
We were in the booth, and another friend of ours came over, and he was like, "At what age is too old? I mean, to claim straight edge?" And I'm like, "I don't think there is a too old." And he's like, "Yeah, but I used to do this or I used to do that, and I don't really feel that I could." And I'm like, "Why not?" And so they all started having this big conversation about, when is it a youth movement anymore? Because it was, straight edge was so young when we got into it. It was like, we were like, maybe, and the generations only last, what, 4 or 5 years,
Right.
as the band cycle. So now it's no longer just a youth movement, because you have so many people that are still straight edge. And I think sometimes it causes a little bit of a dissonance, like,
Sure.
Funny is it going to see youth today, because they're not really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do you think about re-edging?
On Reddit, that comes up quite a bit, and I think you always have people that say one and done. If you're not now, you never were, which then creates that whole paradox. Because if you were never, it's okay if you claim again, right? So that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I think
never thought of it that way.
The general consensus for the vast majority, and this isn't representative of everybody, is that if you're serious about your commitment and you're going to stick to it, then welcome back. It feels like they're not taking something that you take very seriously, and it reflects poorly on you, right? So
right.
I get that, that desire to protect something because it's important to you. I think that it doesn't have to be so black and white, though. I mean, if you're 14, 15 years old and you claim straight edge, you're a teenager, your prefrontal cortex isn't developed. There's a lot of things about who you are that haven't developed yet. And if you end up breaking edge at some point in your early 20s and then end up regretting it and wanting to live a more sober lifestyle, what's wrong with that? I mean, you were a kid. I can't hold it against somebody when they're 13 for, who knows, what did you want to be when you were 13? Did you end up being that? Like,
No,
you
I
have
wanted to be
no
a pilot.
idea. Yeah.
I wanted to be a pilot, and I found out that I got airsick, which I eventually overcame. But it was one of those things where I was just like, I don't want to do this, and not it not be worth it for me ultimately, just because I wouldn't be able to handle any of that.
Yeah, it just seems ridiculous to think that you can expect any kid to make a decision in high school that's going to set everything for the rest of their lives forever. I mean, for me, it did. I could. It resonated with me, and it still does. But there are a lot of people that need to go through it to come out in a
Yeah,
different way,
yeah,
and that's part of their experience. And sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it's not. But I would never exclude anybody who um has a real solid desire, that really takes it seriously, that looks at it as a commitment. And
right.
if they're
Yeah,
committed to it, then and with the funny thing about straight edge is there are no necessarily leaders. There's no hierarchical. We joke the high council who make up the rules,
the
right?
Jedi
Like it's
Council.
the well, like think about like the guy who coined the phrase. He's the most reluctant leader of something that I've ever seen.
Right. Well, he didn't think it was going to kind of turn into the movement
No.
that it did. Yeah. And I
And
know
he
some
like,
of those guys in that band aren't even straight edge anymore.
yeah, I mean, so it's like, people will treat it like dogma when it's not, or add to it when it's really simple. And if you just keep it that way, it's really easy to digest. And you always have
Sure.
someone who's trying to make it, almost like, you see it with some vegans. It's like when they have to be more vegan than everybody else, or more straight edge than everybody else. And to the point where
Right.
like they make it so difficult for anybody else to adopt it, that it's counterintuitive. If you want people, like, have you ever heard someone say, "Oh man, it sucks that I got my life together and I don't do drugs or drink anymore"? Like, people don't say that.
No,
They,
no, not at
so
all.
it's not. It's just ridiculous to just make it such a small, like, they put walls up to make it harder for people to live a more healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. And, to kind of comment on that, two things, like with the veganism aspect, I remember I was vegan for a long time. I'm just a vegetarian now. But, I remember when I was not vegan that I would be like, kind of giving a lot of the people that were vegan, um, I was giving them flack because it was like, I would be like, there's no way that you can eliminate all these animal products from your life and from your diet and all those things. And what this friend of mine told me, he's like, look, man, it's just about trying. It's just about trying to alleviate those things and, like, kind of doing your best, so to speak. And, I have a friend that is like, well, they actually kill more animals when you harvest crops for vegetables. And I'm like, that is the biggest crock of shit ever. I was like, that is like, and like, it's like, just say you like eating meat. Just say that. Just say that. Like, I will accept that answer. You like eating meat because you enjoy it. Just say it. Like, but then they try to, like, skew off into other, like, tangents direct. And this is no slight on anybody that does eat meat, but it just seems to, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that go into, like, why do you hate me because I don't do something? Like, I never understood the hate for straight edge kids. It's like you said, I'm trying to live a pure life, and I'm trying to, like, not do these things and, like, make my life better and not, have physical illness because I drank too much or anything like that. And it's like, why would you hate somebody for that?
Oh, in society, like, I talk a lot about intoxication culture, and how, I worked for a period of time, almost a decade, in corporate America, and there's so much of that structure is based on a handshake and a drink. Deals are made or not made, in a bar or on the golf course or something like that. And when
Yep.
you do something that's different, when you're living differently than the kind of status quo, people, it makes them really uncomfortable because now they don't know how to interface with you. If
Right.
they can't get you to a bar and loosen you up that way, or and my experience in college was that I had guys that told me I can't get you drunk to take advantage of you. So
What? That,
I
like they
mean,
said that verbatim?
it's difficult. When you do something different, they don't know how to interface with it, and that makes them uncomfortable. Therefore, they try to turn it around on you, like you're doing something to
Something
them
wrong.
just by existing.
This one that pisses me off. I do want to say this one. Like as a non-meat eater, like when people try to be overly accommodating, like that makes me uncomfortable. You know,
Okay.
it does, because it's like, they like go, oh, I didn't have anything, and it's like I almost want to tell them, I'm like, I've been through this song and dance for like almost 20 years. I said I usually typically when I have to go to one of these gatherings, I'll eat something before I go, so you don't have to feel bad that you didn't prepare anything, or like, some people are condescending about it. They're like, oh, I think there's some saltine crackers in the cupboard. I'm like, you don't have to be an asshole either. It's like there's like a nice like little middle ground. It's just like, don't be like crazy about it. Don't be like, you know, it makes me, I guess it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know. Like, so I can relate to what you're saying when it's like, there's people that they feel like in order to be in social situations, they've got to be like intoxicated, which, I lived in Hollywood for a while, and that's a big part of the culture there is like rooftop, like parties and things like that. And it's just really like, it's, I'm not straight edge. I've actually been clean and sober for 2 years, but like I wasn't actively doing anything at the time. And so I was just like, well, is that how you advance? You have to actually go and be immersed in this, yeah, intoxication culture. Like it just made no sense.
I mean, I think it's stupid, and I see it like in how they market. You know, how they try to teach. Kids think that it's almost like a rite of passage. When I turn 21, I'm gonna go get shit faced because that's what you do, and no one's ever said to them, hey, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Like you don't have to. You can do anything. But that
Yeah.
that is not the path that everybody has to take. So for some people, that's fine. That's the path they want to be on. Have at it or whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know that you have an alternative. They don't think
Right.
beyond that, and they think this is how things are, and this is how I'm supposed to behave, and these are the milestones that I'm supposed to reach, and they involve drinking and potentially smoking, now vaping nonstop. And now that weed is legal, it's literally everywhere, and it's obnoxious.
Yeah.
And
What,
I had a guy. I have huge equipment at work. I had a guy come in and break my sticker printing equipment. It was already broken, but he broke it more because he showed up high 3 days in a row to
oh
fix my
God.
machine. Like you can't show up to work
You
drunk for
can't show up
showing up
drunk.
high. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. No, I feel you there. And I'm on the fence about that, because it's like at the same time I think like if you make something restrictive like marijuana, or I mean, in the case of alcohol, like prohibition, people are going to find other ways to get it, and with that usually involves some criminal element. And so it's like, well, why not just put it in the hands of like business owners, and then make money at it, and have it in like a contained like space, and like a dispensary will only sell you so much per day. Like they will not sell you like a few pounds of weed. Like they just won't, so like they always do it for like sizes that for personal consumption and things like that. But I am also like, I had this discussion on another episode where I do feel like weed is a gateway drug, and I do feel like there's a lot of things that you could take up as a result of that. So it's one of those things that I'm on the fence about. It's like I don't think people should smoke weed, but at the same time it's like, if you restrict them, it's like growing up in a religious family. Oh, you can't watch that television show, or you can't do this. they're going to be like, fuck it, I'm going to do it, you know? Like,
I'm more or the marketing of it, where it's saying that this is a wonder drug. This is something that, oh, you're feeling depressed, weed'll fix it. Oh, you're having anxiety, weed'll fix it. Again, for lack of a better word, propaganda surrounding it is, it's not truthful. It doesn't, the evidence, the studies that they've done do not support it being this miracle drug. In fact, a lot of the claims that they make, the literature that exists and the studies that say it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
You know, especially for kids whose brains aren't developed, it messes them up. There's so much psychosis in young people who smoke too much or get too much THC in their system, and it destroys their minds. It it gives them psychosis. And this isn't, and this is because I'm straight edge that may say this, but just do the research and you'll find out
reality.
it's just not good for you. It's not medicine.
Yeah.
Medicine is something that comes dosed, and it's a therapeutic dose. You don't get to pick out how much you do. And, you know, the doctor doesn't give you antibiotics and say, just do enough so you feel better. Like, that's not medicine. It's not given to you in a therapeutic dose that's monitored.
Like, I do think people can have different experiences with it and different, you know, some people can be all right with it. Myself personally, I get incredibly paranoid and I get like, you know, just it's not good for my psyche and it's not good for my well-being, so I don't do it anymore, you know? Like, and so it's again, it's one of those things where it's like you ride a fine line between like what is and what isn't acceptable, you know?
Well, I think too with it, your dispensaries are somewhat regulated, but it's not like getting something from a pharmacy, right? Where you're knowing exactly what you're getting. So how much THC is in it and how much you're getting from that edible or, you know, smoking it, you don't really know.
It's like you can have something and it's called like, you know, strawberry bubblegum cake pop or whatever, and it's like,
does that
what's
sound
in
like
this?
medicine?
Well,
medicine's not
I'm just
named
saying,
that.
like, they'll make some like really cool like name with it, like to make it sound alluring and stuff, and then, you know, people are drawn to it, and you know they buy it, and there's no real way of knowing. I mean, because they can cut the shit with like whatever, and you would never know. There's no way to know, you know.
Yeah, so it's again, how do you call something medicine when it's not regulated in a way that makes it so that you know what you're taking into your body every time? It's a crapshoot.
Exactly. Lori Dawn says, I like the idea. We were talking about straight edge. I meant to post this, Lori. I like the idea that you can come back. People need support and shouldn't be excluded when they want to set things right again. Damn right. I wanted to comment on that too. You know, there's somebody I know that was edge, broke edge, and then became edge. And somebody put it like this, like there was all these young kids smearing this individual for re-edging or whatever. And he was like, you know what, to be fair, that guy's been re-edged longer than you young kids have been straight edge. So you should just like shut the fuck up, because it's like, you know, you don't know shit type thing. Get off my lawn type thing. Totally Storm says it's always when you drink, not if you'll drink. Yep. Totally. Now, you know, we got to talking about like, you know, straight edge, we got to talking about weed, all this other stuff. With you know, what you're doing with Sisterhood, like what do you kind of have like in the, well, no, okay, like before I talk about that, because I know I'll talk about this for a long time. Star Trek. You and I are both Star Trek fans, and I could totally nerd out about this, and I don't get the opportunity to very often. So my question for you is, was that something that was like playing in your household? Was that like something you and your family watched, or how did you find Star Trek?
The first memory I have was, okay, so we grew up in a really rural part of New York. We did not have cable TV till I was like in high school. And my grandfather on my dad's side would record like those long play VHS. You know, he'd put like 8 to 10 hours on like one VHS. Original, the Star Trek, movie was on it. And that was when The Next Generation came out. I immediately was like, ooh, space stuff, because I was into Star Wars and Star Trek were always two movies that I really liked growing up. But I didn't have like a lot of access because again, we didn't have cable. I lived on a dirt road, so it was whatever I could get secondhand. Like my one neighbor had a satellite dish. We'd go to his house and watch stuff. But
Sure.
you know,
Yeah, I had a similar experience in that I didn't have cable growing up, but I always used to go over to one of my friends' houses and we would always watch Star Trek like with his family. He was like an extended family to me. And I just loved it because it was so like it it was a little heady for me at the time. I just love the ships like fighting and shit, and I love Spock and all that, you know. But like, you know, as I've gotten older, I was a big Star Wars fan growing up too. But as I've gotten older, I've started to appreciate like Star Trek a little bit more because it does
hmm
like pose a lot of those philosophical and ethical questions. And it's like it's definitely more geared towards like adult themes
hmm
and more like adult like thinking and stuff. So as I've gotten older, I'm like, well, how would I react in this situation? You know, Picard thinks this, but I don't know if I agree with that or not. You know, and like Janeway's gonna strand her crew out in the Delta Quadrant, and it's like, was that really the right thing to do? I don't know. I'm thinking like there's an episode of Star Trek Voyager, the Equinox. Have you ever seen that?
describe it.
So, you know, do you know anything about Voyager? Okay. She's like, yeah, I know.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I watched
she
it. I watched it.
so it was the episode where, you know, this other Federation ship gets stranded out in the Delta Quadrant. It was called the Equinox, and they had to use these like, you know, alien beings' bodies in order to get them to back to the Alpha Quadrant quicker. But they were essentially killing the beings, you know, so that
hmm
they would, you know, be able to fuel their ship to make it go faster. And Janeway is like, you know, that's a horrible, like, unethical thing to do. But then the captain, his name is Captain Ransom, played by John Savage from The Deer Hunter, also a Stella Adler alumnus where I went to school. He said, you know, he's like, look, my crew is like dying. Like, we have no resources. We don't have anything. Like, you know, what would you do in this scenario? Like, he's like, you've got all this like manpower, you've got all these resources and things like that. He was like, I don't think it's fair for you to like, you know, tell me what I'm doing is wrong and stuff like that, you know. So I always put myself in that position. I'm like, well, what if I were there? Would I be a horrible like human being? And but in my mind, I'm not being a horrible human being because I've got people that are under my command, and I'm like,
hmm
you know, I'm trying to ensure their safety. Like all this other
At the
stuff is
expense of
not.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, like it's like when you when the fire really like, you know, hits the flame, I think that's the correct phrase. But like when the shit really hits the fan, is it like, you know, are you going to do the right thing type thing? And I think that's like what makes Star Trek so special.
They created a sentient life, like a new life form, and it was aware of itself and it learned to communicate. And they had to decide, what do we do with it? It's destroying our ship. If we continue to let it live, we die. If we destroy
Yep.
it, we destroy a new life form. So how do we, you had forces that were saying destroy it right off the bat, and then Picard had to decide whether or not to like figure out how to communicate it, and they like hijacked Data's brain, and they were talking through Data, and then they eventually let him off into space somehow. But
Was Worf one of the first people that said kill it? He had to be.
of course,
Worf is the shit. Much better character in DS9. DS9 is my favorite.
in what, like high school,
Yeah, it's definitely I think the
with
most
the
layered and
Kardashians and
complex.
the Bajorans and that whole like civil war between them, and
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah.
the most political, like it's like a political drama. And my mom also said it's like almost like a soap opera. She was watching it one time and she actually sat down and watched a few episodes a few times and she was like, this is almost like a soap opera for men. I was like,
I mean,
yeah,
you've
a
got a
little bit,
Dax
you know?
on the show. I mean, you've got a Dax with the worm and all the memories of their previous people inside of them, and who's in
Yeah.
love with who, and oh, Cisco knew you when you weren't you, and all that other nonsense. So
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the new Star Trek?
I haven't watched it.
Oh, you're better off.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they just did that Section 31 movie, and it's not getting very good reviews. You know, the thing about new Star Trek is, you know, regardless of how you feel politically, like Star Trek would always analyze things from different perspectives, like we were talking about. But with new Star Trek, it's like, this is what we believe and this is what we're propagating, and it comes across like that. And it's like, that's fine, but there's like subtlety and nuance. Like they're like hitting you over the head, like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, Jesus. And it's just not very well written to begin with. It's very emotional. Like I love when they talk in Star Trek, when they do what they call techno babble, to where they're just like talking about routine functions of the ship, like, oh, we're going to have to increase power to the warp nacelles to be able to accelerate past warp 5 because we, da 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 da, whatever, um but it's like I'm not even kidding. I just watched a review on Section 31, and Michelle Yeoh is like the new protagonist or whatever. And somebody, one of the characters was like, "You really are a bad bit, huh?" Like that. And I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Really? This is where we're at now? This is what you guys have produced Star Trek to?" Frustrating.
Well, I
Angers
mean,
me.
the original Star Trek series, they took on modern challenges of what, like race and gender and war, and what is the Federation's role? Are they imperialist or not? And how, you have their relationship with the Klingons, and so everything was kind of like took current day issues and put them in a sci-fi world where you had to come up with a solution, where the
Right.
Federation maybe wasn't making always the right choice, but they were always trying to make the right choice. And you saw that too, and I think in the Next Generation, and what you were describing in Voyager as well. So if they're not doing that anymore, that does a disservice to the whole franchise, because it was all about
Right.
like, how do we look
How do we
at
come to a
ourselves.
compromise?
Right, and it's like, well, this is how we used to be. Like, in the original series, it was always like, well, in the 20th century we did this, but now we're so advanced and we're beyond that,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
it's all that whole like
Yeah.
striving to be more. And then in the Next Generation, they had to keep constantly being like, well, you guys were this warring race of assholes. Like, why should
Yeah.
I not introduce you to the Borg and let them annihilate you?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And I like DS9 too, in that like Cisco is very like, he's very like morally compromised sometimes. Like he doesn't want to do certain things, and then he's for again, like the Voyager episode. He doesn't want to do certain things, but he's forced to do them for the greater like common good, Like he doesn't like to, like there was an episode where Eddington, his former security chief, joins the Maquis, and he's like, I'm gonna take care of these motherfuckers right now, and I'm gonna like nuke this planet so that like nobody can live there, And like, have you seen that one?
I don't have a current memory of it.
Oh, okay. I'll have to send
Like,
you the scene because it's really good. Like even Worf, who is like calling for like the most like offensive, aggressive action, is like, Cisco tells him to like bomb this planet, and like he looks over at him like, "Are you fucking crazy?" Like, are you, like that's a huge character change for Worf, Like,
yeah,
and like
a bridge
everybody
too
was
far.
yeah, everybody was commenting in the comment section. It's like, like your actions are extreme whenever Worf is looking at you like, what the fuck, So, yeah, it's a great episode, and New Trek, at least in my estimation, doesn't really deliver any of that. It's very like flashy. They make it very cinematic looking. It's very fast paced. It's very um it's just very, it's like cheap almost, It's just not the Star Trek I grew up with.
I'm gonna have to watch it now and see if it's true.
I made it through 6 episodes of Discovery, and then I was like, I'm out. I watched the first season of Picard. I was like, I'm out. One season of Brave New or Strange New Worlds. I was out. Didn't watch the animated Lower Decks. I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore. You broke my heart, Star Trek. No. It's like, no. This is one of my favorite things. Before I want you to, plug, everything that you've got like going on, and where we can find you at.
Okay, well, the website is XSisterHoodX.com. We are working on booking an Edge Fest that is right before Furnace Fest next year, and that's xedgefestx.com. The social club, the Straight Edge Social Club, is straightedgesocialclub.com. And right now there's some merch left over that Alex had made. But we are planning on being at Tie Down this year. We will be able to set up a meetup, and we'll have the booth, and we'll get a pic. Perfect Bound zine with interviews from on the Sisterhood. I collect interviews from women from all over the world, and I ask them a series of questions, and it really gives you an idea of the shared experience, but also the diversity in the experience of women who are straight edge. But and the zine goes, it's designed in a way that's like, what drew you to it? How do you define it? How has it impacted your life? And what challenges have you faced? And it tells that story through photos and bits and pieces of the interviews that the people had done. And then what else am I forgetting? I think that's most of it. It's not enough, right? I need to do more.
Oh, we could always do more, but I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. I think it's great. And, I love to see people like kind of put like a unique spin on, being involved in hardcore and doing things a little bit differently. So that's why I primarily ask guests like yourself to come on the show, because it's fascinating to me, and it's interesting, so I love that. And I wish you guys you gals rather, the absolute best success. And we talked about this at the beginning of the hour. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
I would say to just do the thing. One of the things that sucks when you're a kid, any kid, but then especially when, at least my experience as a young woman, was people were constantly telling you can't do something. You can't do that, you're just a kid, or you can't achieve that because you're too young, or you're too this, or you're too that. And I guess one of the scene gave me, I guess a gift that it gave me, was that DIY epic, was just do the thing. If it doesn't exist, then make it exist. If you don't have any, one of the things I hear so much, and that's one of the reasons the social club exists, is there's so many people who say that claim that they're straight edge and don't know a single other person who is, and they have this really lonely existence. And that boggles my mind, because I'm so spoiled. I live on the East Coast. I can travel 1,000 miles from here, and I know a dozen people that I can meet up with, and we have a shared ethos, right?
Yeah.
So I would, if something doesn't exist, you can create it, or you can work towards it, or you can find it, and that would
Absolutely.
be I would not believe the people that told me that I can't do the thing, whatever that thing was. And
Yeah.
and I would just say, like, have more confidence in that. Like, you can't make change unless you try. But with this social club, so many people feel alone, and that sucks. That's not how it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's probably difficult for somebody in, say like Oklahoma. There might not be a hardcore scene or straight edge kids there, but start one. Like that's how it gets going, like I know there's like a hardcore scene in South Dakota, I know there's some
There's
in
a
like,
hardcore scene
you know,
everywhere. It's
yeah,
it's everywhere. They're in Malaysia, it's in Germany, in France, and
yeah,
everywhere. And if it's not there, then start a band.
kick one up.
Introduce your
Yeah,
friends to it.
exactly. To what you were saying about people telling you that you can't, my dad always, he goes, "Can't never did nothing." I was like, it's a good quote. That's good advice,
Yeah,
So
because you
that,
automatically put yourself at a handicap, and then you're like, well, I can't do that. Only the
yeah.
cool kids can do that. And it's like, you are the cool kid. Do the thing.
Have you ever read Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill? You have read it? Yeah, HR from Bad Brains always talked about that, and I was always kind of off put by the title, because it's like, oh, Think and Grow Rich, like, is this some sort of like money making, like pyramid scheme type book or something like that? It's not like that at all. And I always try to tell people, like, look, read it, apply the steps in there, do it. I said I started seeing like changes in my life after like 2 weeks, like just, reinforcing that positive energy, just doing things, taking little steps to be able to achieve your goals. It's a really great read. I recommend it. The language is a little bit archaic, but I think they have different editions now to where, if you find anything offensive, like they don't exist. There's been so many revisions and alterations in it now. But Lori Dawn says, beautifully said. Can't wait to see what Kelly can do next.
She's like my biggest cheerleader. Lori's
Oh,
fantastic. Like she's always,
I love Lori.
yeah.
She's great.
But
And
on the
she's
Napoleon Hill, it's essentially, I don't know if you ever read The Secret. It's the same. It's the art, like, or anything that
yeah,
has to do with manifestation, except it's practical. It's not like just asking the universe for something. Napoleon says, figure out what it is that you want. Think about the steps that you need to do to get what you want. Then do the steps. It's
yes.
incredibly practical, and it's not magical thinking at all. It's think about it, make a plan, enact the plan, get a result. It's highly simplified, but I mean it's basically what he says to do.
One of my friends in the hardcore scene actually taught me the cork board method, to where you post like little goals up on the cork board, and then, once you've achieved one of those goals, you remove the card. And it's almost like gives you like a dopamine hit, to where,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I achieved this goal. I've always looked at life. Have you ever played RPGs?
Which type of game? Because like I feel like RPG really like is a giant umbrella that people shove lots of stuff underneath it.
Well, I mean, I guess the aspects of the RPG I'm talking about are like where you can like level up your characters, and like, you can learn a new skill. You become a different like Final Fantasy, there's different classes. There's like,
Mm-hmm.
warrior class and mages and bards and things like that, to where you can teach yourself different things, and like, you know, um weaponry and things like that. And I always think about, like, every time I do something, I'm like, I'm going on an adventure, going on a quest. Like, this is the goal, this is where I got to go, this is what I'm going to do. What resources, what tools do I need for my journey? Like, I'm going to equip this, and I'm going to equip cell phone charger, and I'm going to equip wallet and things like that. So
So yeah, I mean there was like the old version of that is like the Heroes Quest. Sierra did a game called Heroes Quest, and that very much you had your specs and you had to spec out, and then you were either a mage or a paladin or something like that. More
right.
modern, I would not even modern. It's because ancient is like I've played Skyrim. I can't even tell you how many times. Any Bethesda game, I will engross myself in completely to the detriment of everything else around me. So
Have you played
I
Tears of the Kingdom?
no.
Oh, God, you want to talk about a time consumer, but in the best way. I mean, like, I actually thank the creators of Tears of the Kingdom for keeping me clean and sober. I think if I had done anything else, I would have fell back into it. But I definitely put 320 hours worth of gameplay into that game.
I I've played a lot of Fallout. I love those apocalyptic, open, post-apocalyptic worlds where you're like going through and looking how civilization fell apart and putting the pieces together and being like, because I love that whole world of Fallout because it has that, like the whole propaganda aspect of it and the politics of um, the government and warring with China and all the how commerce and the capitalism was awful in that timeline, and I get very like into
Get
it.
into it. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't played that one. I know that was on Xbox, so there was a period where I just wasn't playing games at all, and then I got a Switch and it was over. I was like, "Oh God, this is amazing," like just the funnest games on there, like Mario and stuff like that.
The whole team that I do everything with because we really are a team. We have Alex and Storm and Angel and Timmy and we all work together. My buddy Mark, who did the zine with me, Rebecca, who's going to be on your podcast coming up.
Yeah.
Um, we do a lot together. Just and I know I'm forgetting everybody else.
Do you
Like
work with
my
Angel?
kids. And yeah, Angel's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, she is. It's been like a Women of the Pit Sisterhood month. Like, she's gonna come on the show too. So
And
fantastic.
then
It's really.
you get
Go
Danielle
ahead.
and get Danielle Dombrowski, and you're gonna have
Yeah.
like half the people I know. So
I don't really know a lot of women in hardcore, to be honest with you. Like, I wish I knew more, like, just for the, the sake of, friendship and just getting to know, somebody that has a different perspective of the hardcore scene than me. So it's really great to be able to, I didn't have a woman guest for like 2 years. So I was like,
Shame on
and it,
you.
well, no, I wanted to, and it was just hard for me to, be able to, find people that, were wanted to like commit to it. And I didn't know y'all. So now that I know you all, it will be, yeah, fantastic. I will definitely look into getting Danielle on the show because I know that she did Sarah's show. So, which is also fantastic. You should check
Yeah,
that out, The
Sarah's
Hardcore
great.
Therapist, which I'll be on an episode of it next month. So you should check that out.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, we plugged everything. And before this audio feed craps out again, we're going to post all the comments, or excuse me, the social links in the comments and everything. And you can support Sisterhood and Straight Edge Social Club at the links that we give you. Like I said, Hell's Heart, co.bigcartel.com. Use the code 20 for 20% off your entire order. I want to throw up some samples here real quick because I think y'all will like these shirts, and I know you'll like one of them specifically. This is Steve McQueen Bullet. We got a Black Flag mock here. We got Psycho 2. We got Scream, Tatum Glow in the Dark. We got a Scream Randy Glow in the Dark. And also the very shirt that I'm wearing, the Star Trek 3 Search for Spock shirt. So, and we have ones from every single original Star Trek movie, 1 through 6. So go and pick one of those up. And also, yeah, hang back for a few minutes. I always get everybody a shirt that comes on the show. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for attending the show and for interacting. And once again, I want to thank Kelly Sisterhood. You've been awesome. Everybody, namaste, jobless, and be good. Thank you, Kelly.
Hell's Heart,